Greetings and salutations. This is Derek with Taylor Whips. Today I want to talk about the difference between Australian and American style bullwhips, what those terms mean, how you can distinguish between them, and I hope to include information that's going to be helpful to you both on your whip making or your whip appreciating journey. Let's get into it. Now, bullwhips are single piece whips where the rigid handle has been integrated into the whip in such a way that it cannot be removed. These handles come in a variety of lengths. I have seen anywhere from 5 inches all the way up to 16 inches. But any whip where the handle is integrated into the whip would technically qualify as a bullwhip. The most popular lengths for handles are typically between 8 inches and about 12 inches. Now, the materials used in handles can vary. Quite often I see steel used, whether that's a steel rod or like a nail spike. I've seen fiberglass, I've seen cane, I've seen aluminum, things as exotic as graphite or carbon fiber have been used, and anything else. All the materials have their benefits and drawbacks that the maker has to balance as they are making their particular project. The thing that all of them have in common, however, is their ability to not permanently bend or break when pressure is applied. Australian-style bullwhips and American-style bullwhips differ in a few key ways, and in this video I'm going to focus on construction methods and weight. Now, an important caveat, there is no broadly agreed upon definition for what constitutes an Australian or an American-style bullwhip. These are terms that have been applied to the past projects and have been used in the present, but there is no coalition of whip makers that has given a specific definition of what is and is not an Australian bullwhip or is and is not an American-style bullwhip. There is room for interpretation, and I'll get into that. My purpose here is not to capture every detail of whip making and its history, or to be an exhaustive list that cannot or will not be superseded by other information. Rather, my purpose is to give some background information that will be helpful to those newer in the whip world to appreciate the works that they come across. I'm going to try and give as many examples and as specific information as I can without being exhaustive. In Johnny Ogren's book, How to Make Quality Kangaroo Leather Whips, he talks about 2 different varieties of whip, the classic bullwhip and the Australian-style bullwhip, or Aussie bullwhip. I'll use them interchangeably. Now, in this book, he shows that classic or American-style bullwhips are typically constructed with an initial step down from the handle to the core, which is filled in by binding a yoke onto the handle and beginning the braiding at the step down, as well as binding on the bolsters in such a way as to provide a slight swell or reinforcement in this area. Australian bullwhips, by contrast, are made by making the core of the bullwhip the same diameter as the handle and beginning the braiding at the top of the handle rather at the transition point between handle and thong. He argues that Australian bullwhips tend to be lighter and slimmer than their American-style counterparts, and that longer-handled bullwhips are more likely to be categorized as Australian-style. Ron Edwards, in his book How to Make Whips, shows the process for making a bullwhip with a larger piece of wood or cane as the handle, where the core is placed into a hole at the end of this tapered handle, and the whip is then built up to seamlessly cover over this taper. Now, in practice, the construction methods that Ron Edwards used are a lot closer to the classic or American-style bullwhips than they are to the Australian-style bullwhips, even though Ron Edwards was an Australian whip maker. This demonstrates how difficult it sometimes is to really make a determination about if something is an Australian or an American-style bullwhip. Another example of how some whips defy easy classification is the 450 series bullwhip developed by David Morgan. This whip incorporates elements of both the Australian and American style construction. It is definitely an American bullwhip that uses Australian braided belly construction, as he records in the 2nd edition of his book, Whips and Whip Making. Where most people never get to see the internals of the whips that they have, it can be quite difficult to tell if your whip was constructed with Australian or American style construction. You can look for a swell at the end of the handle to give you some idea about how it was constructed, but having a swell does not necessarily make it either an American-style bullwhip or not an Australian style bullwhip. There is some room for interpretation in both of those. This is a 10-foot Terry Jacka bullwhip made in his Outback style, and you can see that it very clearly has a swell at the end of the handle, even though I would very much classify this as an Australian style bullwhip and not an American style bullwhip. An easier way to look at and to understand Australian versus American style bullwhips is to look at the weight that they have. Now, weight is connected to, but I would call it distinct from, the other construction methods. The choice of handle material does impact the weight, as does the length of the handle material, but it's not the only thing to consider. Now, using the 450 series bullwhip made by David Morgan as a prime example, it relies on having a lot of weight in the handle and not so much weight in the thong in order for it to work properly. Because there's so much counterweighting in the heel of that whip, in use that means that it gets most of its energy for cracking from below the hand as opposed to up above the hand. The balance of these whips is also a lot closer to the hand than it is further out into the thong of the whip. As a prime example of the Australian style bullwhip is the DeLongis whip that was created as a joint effort between Anthony DeLongis and Terry Jacka. Now, this whip was designed to have the benefits of a bullwhip with the long-handled leverage of a stock whip. This design typically has little weight in the heel and most of its weight in the thong of the whip. Now, I've gotten to work with Anthony for a number of years now, and I've gotten to see firsthand the reasons for the whip being constructed as it is, and I've gotten to have him try a number of the whips that I've made to see how well they fit within the scope of his design. Now, here I have 4 different examples of DeLongis whips that he's gotten to try and give me feedback on. All of these work well for his system, and yet all of these have different weights and different feels. All 4 of these whips are based on a very similar design, and the only material difference between them is the choice of handle material, the weighting in the thong, and the use or lack thereof of lead counterbalancing in the heel knob. This first one I made in 2019. It features a 14-inch handle made of 1/4 inch steel rod with no counterbalancing in the heel. Its balance point is roughly at 12 inches from the end of the heel knob and has an overall weight of 476 grams. The second one I made in 2023. It features a 12-inch long 1/4 inch steel rod as a handle with a lot of counterbalancing in the heel. Its balance point is at roughly 10.5 inches, and it has an overall weight of 508 grams. The third one I made in 2024. It features a 12-inch long 1/4 inch steel rod as a handle, and it has no counterbalancing in the heel. Its balance point is at roughly 12.25 inches, and it has an overall weight of 503 grams. The fourth is one I made in 2026. This one features a 12-inch section of 5/16 inch fiberglass as the handle. Its balance point is roughly at 12.5 inches, and it has an overall weight of 414 grams. Whip number 1, I would say, is almost entirely handle weight. The thong feels very light, and most of what I feel when I use it is in the handle. Whip number 2 has more weight in the thong and handle, but I definitely feel the counterbalancing as I use it. Whip number 3 has a balance that feels very far forward. Even though its balance point is about the same as whip number 1 and has about the same weight as whip number 2, this one feels the heaviest out of all 4. When I use it, it feels like I'm moving the first 2 feet of the thong more than any other part of the whip. Whip number 4, even though it is lighter overall than any other whip, feels heavier than whip number 1. Even though they have the same balance point, the handle has very little weight, which makes it feel balanced beyond the transition, even if it is balanced at the transition. Now, using these 4 whips as case studies, even though they all are Australian-style bullwhips in their construction and in their design, the first 2 feel a lot more like the American bullwhips than the second 2. The second 2, whips number 3 and 4, they very much feel, because of their forward balance, like Australian whips, and these former 2 feel very much like American whips, where they are more balanced in the hand. This leads me to believe that a whip can have Australian construction, Australian design, and even Australian weight, but still have an American feel. Or whips can have any combination of these factors. If I had to oversimplify it though, I would say that American whips tend to be more balanced in the hand or have more weight in the handle, where Australian whips tend to have less weight in the handle and tend to be balanced more towards the thong. A good rule of thumb might be, if the handle feels light, it's probably an Australian style bullwhip. If the handle feels heavy, it's probably more closely associated with the American style bullwhip. Put a different way, American style bullwhips tend to rely on weight, and Australian style bullwhips tend to rely more on leverage. When I pick up a whip these days, I love getting to see the intricate plaiting patterns. I love getting to see how consistent the rollout is, how easily it cracks, and things like this. But I recognize that every whip is designed to crack easily. Every whip is designed to go from your hand to full extension and not wander back and forth. Many whips have very cool and interesting patterns both on the handles and the thongs, but very rarely do those provide any material impact onto how it actually behaves. The thing that I focus on more these days is looking at where the weight of the whip is and how that weight actually affects the performance. I find myself asking if the weight of the whip is above my hand, below it, or both. When I throw it, how does that weight impact the wave of energy? When I slow the whip down, how does the whip tell me that it wants to move? Construction methods really do impact the weight of the whip and how it feels, as does the materials that are selected for use, as does the design of the whip itself. Does it really matter if a whip is classified as an American style bullwhip or an Australian style bullwhip? I'd probably say no. A rose by any other name would smell as sweet, or to put it a little different, a whip by any other name would crack as nicely. But being able to distinguish what a whip is and how its construction affects its performance, I believe are really essential tools both for appreciation of a person's work and being able to make improvements to your own work and your own designs. I hope this information has been helpful to you and will help you on your whip making or your whip cracking or your whip appreciating journey. If you learned something new or if there's something that I've missed, please tell me about it. I am always looking to learn more. I appreciate you hanging out with me. Keep cracking, and I will see you on my next adventure.